Let's try that again with the microphone. The subcommittees will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that the chair be authorized to declare a recess at any time. Without objection, so ordered. Folks, thank you to all of us for, okay. You get a lot of input up here from the left and the right. And not the left, just not politically, just your left side and your right side. We're joined today by General Randall Reed, Commander of the U.S. Transportation Command. Thank you, General Reed. It was great to see you in my office a couple of weeks ago. We had a nice meeting. For you being here to testify at this very important hearing. I would also like to welcome Mrs. Reed, who is in the audience today. Well, no wonder you're smiling, General Reed. We appreciate you being here, ma'am. Overall, you know, TRANSCOM's mission is a critical component of our national security posture. Our mobility forces are the cornerstone of our ability to project power on a global scale. We are facing an increasingly contested logistics environment, especially in the Indo-PACOM area of responsibility. You know, as part of that, our fuels. As a single manager for global bulk fuel management and delivery, TRANSCOM has a crucial role in supporting our strategic operations. Given the tyranny of distance that must be overcome, ensuring reliable fuel delivery, that is paramount. I remain concerned that demand for fuel in the Pacific exceeds capacity, and our aging air refueling fleet is an increasing readiness concern. Another subject, household goods. I'm especially interested in the progress of the transition from the legacy tender of service program to the global household goods contract, the challenges that have been encountered, and TRANSCOM's plan for moving forward. Our focus should always remain on ensuring our service members receive the quality relocation experience they deserve. Another subject, civilian mariners. I remain concerned about the continued lack of qualified civilian mariners and the impact personnel shortages have on the ability of the Navy and MARAD to support our entire fleet. It is obvious that we need to grow the civilian mariner pools and expand state maritime academies like the Great Lakes Maritime Academy at Northwestern Michigan College. TRANSCOM resources. I'm also interested in hearing more about how TRANSCOM is navigating budgetary constraints, personnel shortages, and supply chain vulnerabilities to execute its mission requirements. For the previous 3 years, TRANSCOM did not submit an unfunded priorities list. I repeat, did not submit an unfunded priorities list. I hope that you consider using this tool going forward to ensure that TRANSCOM is meeting its requirements and does not accept unnecessary risk. And in closing here in the brief opening remarks, I look forward to hearing how TRANSCOM plans to confront the challenges of tomorrow. I will now yield to the ranking member for his opening statement. Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you and our colleagues on the Navy side of this for joining us in this really, really important meeting. And General Reed, good to be back talking to you about an old problem, once again, that remains to be resolved. Today, as we assess the posture and readiness of our mobility enterprise, I want to emphasize the critical role of air, land, and sea mobility capabilities in ensuring our national security. These forces are all too often underappreciated, and I'm grateful that we are meeting jointly to address the issues our forces face in providing transportation, sustainment, and distribution of our Navy's warfighters. To put it plainly, we need to get back to the basics of how we operate and refocus on maintaining our critical assets and building our workforce to meet the warfighter needs. The Chairman went through 6 different specific issues. So I'm going to perhaps cut some of this short. Too often we in Congress and in the Department of Defense become overly focused on the new, fancy, shiny technologies without paying attention to the resources we need to sustain and maintain our fighting forces. We are too focused on throwing the long ball instead of perfecting the basics of blocking and tackling. Oh, I like that. back in the day, but I won't go back to college here. It's often unappreciated, but it's the work of U.S. Transcom, and it will ultimately win or lose us in the next contest. Our underinvestment in the maritime industry illustrates this point. We often talk in this committee about our naval fleet, but as Transcom knows, our mobility forces often rely on more than just military vessels. Our broader commercial partners are crucial enablers for the global mobility, and the lack of available U.S.-flagged merchant ships pose a severe threat to our sea lift capabilities. Without a robust and reliable sea lift capacity, our ability to project power and sustain operations globally is at risk. It's my hope that the SHIPS Act, which I have worked on with Chairman Kelly here and his predecessor, Mike Waltz, will play a key role in catalyzing investment in our maritime industrial base to ensure that we have a robust maritime industry ready and able to support our economic and national security. As we take steps to rebuild our maritime forces, I hope that we will think hard about both the short and the long-term steps needed to ensure that our nation has the maritime force that it needs. When we talk about recapitalization, I think we must ensure that we are sending clear and consistent demand signals to incentivize the construction and operation of a U.S.-flagged vessels to restore our maritime readiness. As much as I love to talk about ships, I am concerned about the state of our air mobility fleet. The KC-46A Pegasus, while a promising platform, continues to face significant operational deficiencies, including issues with maintenance, remote vision systems, and other critical components. These unresolved challenges hinder its ability to perform air refueling missions effectively, and in some cases at all, which is this is the cornerstone of our global mobility strategy. We must accelerate efforts to address these deficiencies to ensure the KC-46A can meet its intended missions and requirements. I recognize that this problem isn't just a Transcom issue and that we must hold the Department of Defense accountable. And here I would insert this: the Department of Air Force accountable and the Department of Defense accountable, and most importantly, the Congress and the Senate of the United States, where a good deal of this problem emanates from. But on an optimistic note, I hope that today we will hear more about the impacts of these issues on Transcom's missions and solutions to fix it. I look forward to the hearing. Our witnesses, Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi, and I now recognize the chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman Bergman and Ranking Member Garamendi, for leading today's hearing, and thank you to my battle buddy and Ranking Member Joe Courtney for his leadership on these issues. These two subcommittees have a long history of working well together to strengthen our mobility enterprise, and I look forward to continuing that work today. Amateurs do operations, professionals do logistics. We will win or lose any war that our nation does based on our ability to apply logistics and to be better than everyone else. I want to start with thanking former member of the House and Armed Service Committee, Jerry Carl, back there. Ms. Reed, thank you for your service. I'm going to tell you, we can't do it without our family. It's a family business in more ways than one, and we can't do it without the faithful support of our spouses or significant others and our children and our parents and all those people who make so much. Transcom is going to be the decisive competitive advantage that wins or loses the next war. And I pray that we never have that, but our ability to project logistics across the globe is the determining factor. The SHIPS Act, which Mr. Garamendi said, we have to redo our shipbuilding industrial building capacity, and that is both in naval ships that are combat ships and logistical ships, and we've got to build back that. We became the greatest maritime nation in the world because we had the shipbuilding ability. We can do it again, but it's going to take hard work and commitment. I have a whole lot of comments, but General Reed, you are here at a critical time, in a critical location, and we depend on you to give us the ideas. As you and I talked about earlier, we want you to help us to solve this problem, because if you don't, that leaves it in the hands of Congress, and we are not known for solving problems in the most efficient and effective and quickest way. So we need your guidance to do this the right way to make sure that we stay strong. So whether we're talking ships, whether we're talking about refueling airplanes in theater, whether we're talking about the aging C-17 fleet that we have and what is the next generation, or how long do we slep these folks, do we extend their life to still stay competitive? We have to win the logistics war, and we're depending on you. And the most important, in my opinion, and I'm an operator, but you are in the most important four-star command, combatant command that we have. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Oh, may I enter my actual written notes into the record, please?
So ordered. Thank you, Chairman Kelly. I now recognize Ranking Member Courtney from Connecticut for his opening statement.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Bergman, Chairman Kelly, and my friend Ranking Member John Garamendi for once again having this joint hearing. Again, the jurisdiction of these two subcommittees make the logic of this joint hearing more efficient. And again, General Reed, it was a pleasure to meet you in my office a couple of weeks ago. Congratulations to you on your confirmation. And again, I think, obviously your experience and training make you the right person for, as my friend Trent Kelly said, really, in many respects, the most important command. He did quote General Omar Bradley's famous quote about amateurs and professionals, and we actually in this panel are united in terms of really trying to make sure that mission becomes a success. And again, I think my friends and colleagues have already stated what the challenges are out there in really almost every theater, whether it's European Command, Indo-PACOM, the Middle East, logistical missions are really, right there at the top of the list in terms of, whether or not we can, as a country and our allies, succeed together. So I'm not going to repeat or go through all of that. I just would note that, obviously the SHIPS Act has strong support also in the subcommittee, but I would just note that in the last two Congresses, NDAA, we have already moved out in terms of trying to get MARAD to really embrace the notion of new build programs in addition to foreign purchase of sea lift vessels that are out there. I realize, we're in a moment of transition, so having a witness today from MARAD, I guess wasn't in the cards. I hope the chairman will both sort of put that on our dance card soon, again, as soon as we have somebody from MARAD, because I know personally I have a lot of questions about just, whether or not the authorities that we enacted in 2024 and, in 2023 and 2024 are actually, underway in that department. We are strong supporters in terms of U.S.-built sea lift, and we think we have a model that actually is affordable and executable. And, as I said, that's something that certainly I was looking forward to today's hearing to go into greater detail. But again, we've got a lot to talk about with General Reed here today, and I look forward to your testimony. And again, with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. And General Reed, love to hear your opening statement.
Chairman Bergman, Ranking Member Garamendi, Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Courtney, distinguished members of this subcommittee, good afternoon. I am honored to join you today with my lovely bride, Lynn, and Senior Enlisted Leader, Chief Master Sergeant Brian Krzelnik, to represent the men and women of the United States Transportation Command. The Warfighting Command, we project, maneuver, and sustain the joint force anytime, anywhere in support of the national objectives. Our warfighting elements consist of 3 service component commands: Military Surface Deployment and Distribution Command, Military Sea Lift Command, Air Mobility Command, and our direct subordinate, the Joint Enabling Capabilities Command. Beyond our core military units, U.S. Transcom maintains strong partnerships with the commercial transportation industry, our 4th component, to fully execute our unified command plan tasks. Today's security environment presents numerous complex challenges to force projection and logistics as adversaries actively seek to disrupt, degrade, and deny our transportation networks, especially within the homeland. With 85% of U.S. combat power residing within the continental United States, resilient transportation networks fortified against malicious cyber attacks now prioritize the crucial port-to-port transportation segment. Even after overcoming initial deployment disruptions, we must continuously enhance our capabilities to maintain a decisive advantage. Decisive advantage demands a modernized and connected sea lift, airlift, and air refueling fleet. By 2032, 54% of our government-owned sea lift ships will reach the end of their service life. In addition, we fully support the Maritime Security Program, Tanker Security Program, the Jones Act, and cargo preference laws that all work to ensure we have the necessary U.S. flag capability and U.S. merchant mariners ready to move sensitive defense material during a national emergency. The start of a recapitalization plan is due for our airlift fleet because of the long lead time for platform development. We welcome the service-led recap plans for the air refueling fleet, which must continue uninterrupted into the future. Even after the Air Force accepts the final contracted KC-46, the average age of the remaining KC-135 fleet will be 67 years old. Finally, we remain fully committed to the ongoing transformation of the global household goods program. Moving is an integral part of our life, and while most of us relocate every 2 to 3 years and learn better ways of doing it every time we move, it is always challenging. The department began transitioning to the Global Household Goods Contract, or GHC, in April 2024 with the goal of providing an improved moving experience for service members and their families. This transformation is a monumental task and reaches into every aspect of a service member's relocation. And because GHC is reshaping how we move service members, their families, and their memories, we remain in close collaboration with the services to identify, then take action to resolve the issues. Because we are centered on service members and families, we recently made adjustments to the transfer rate to the prime contractor. While it has not been an easy path and there have been issues, there should be no doubt we will see this through to the fellow service members and their families who deserved an improved moving experience, and we are going to deliver on this experience. These challenges I mentioned today may sound daunting. However, I continue to stress that our professionals will overcome any disruption. We are emboldened by the guiding principles to be ready, united, and decisive. Our enterprise achieves unity by forging strong bonds with allies, partners, commercial industry, the services, and our fellow combatant commands to amplify our collective strength. This level of unity demonstrates the joint force is not and will not be deterred by contested environments. U.S. Transcom was created as a purpose-built force to provide the essential surface, ocean, and airlift capacity to project and sustain American power anywhere in the world at any time. Thank you for your continued and unwavering support for the mission and our people. I'd like to thank this committee for the support that you gave to make sure that we can to procure 2 ships off the market. And I welcome your questions, and together we deliver.
Thank you, General Reed, for your opening statement. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions, so we'll get right to it. The Mobility Capabilities and Requirements Study identified the need to mitigate mobility impacts of operating in a contested environment, okay? How is Transcom preparing for strategic lift in a potentially contested operating environment?
Chairman, the first thing we're doing is we continue to study and update the study. We anticipate that within the next year, now that we have a new president in office with his priorities, we will have updated information to update the requirement study. As we're doing that, we're also rededicating ourselves to planning with our fellow combatant commands, in particular in the Pacific. And so as we plan with them, we are reassessing their requirements. We are reassessing the threats that the adversary will present to us, and at the same time, we work with the theater to alter what we're doing to make sure that we can succeed. Additionally, we're putting additional concentration on the cyber realm, and with outstanding support from Cybercom, we're also stressing ourselves in that area as well.
Thank you. And these 5 minutes go fast, so we could go into a lot of detail on a lot of these, but I understand on a different subject, Transcom has shifted to the conditions-based approach for the phase-in of the global household goods contract and will move task orders this peak season between GHC and the legacy tender of service system because of insufficient capacity. What result has the shift to a conditions-based phase-in had on customer satisfaction rates?
Chairman, this has always been conditions-based to start off with because the goal of the transition was to make sure that there was no harm to the service members who actually make the move. With the conditions base in that, we look to see what capacity actually resides, whether someone is under the current program that we're on now, as well as what we're transitioning to. As we manage the transition, we also make sure that we have the opportunity to see the trends, where folks need help, and how we can continue to help.
Okay, thank you. And switching subjects again here, how is Transcom addressing the vulnerabilities in bulk fuel delivery and storage infrastructure across your AOR?
Once again, that begins with an assessment. It begins with what we determine in-house, and then we work together with the theaters as well. We look at their requirements, we look at the infrastructure that they have in there, and then from there we jointly chart a path forward to success.
Okay, and then kind of the last subject here in my 5 minutes, budget and resources. Are current funding levels adequate to support Transcom's operational requirements and modernization efforts? And if they aren't, where are there critical funding gaps?
First and foremost, we support the services and what they're pursuing. They're the ones that organize, train, and equip, and actually provide the equipment that we use, so anything that we can do to support them is key. And then secondly, as we continue to seek additional used foreign ships that suit our needs, anything that we can do to accelerate the procurement of those ships would help.
How is Transcom balancing the need for the near-term readiness with long-term investments in future capabilities?
The first thing that we look to do is to make sure that we can answer the call for what we're tasked to do today. We take care of the equipment and the folks that we have on hand, and then we adjust our plans to make sure that we can answer the call. As we continue to look forward, we look at gaps, we look at the shortfalls, and then we pursue to close those in conjunction with the services.
Okay. Is Transcom planning to submit a list of unfunded priorities this cycle?
Right now, since we don't have a budget, we continue to look at what we require. As the commander, I will look to see what tools I have to actually get the equipment that the folks need, and I will not be shy to use whatever tool is available. If the unfunded requirement is the path, then I'll certainly use that.
Well, I guess about the only guidance I would give you from this committee's perspective, you should have that list in your pocket at the appropriate time, because I know your staff knows, and we would appreciate it. And with that, I yield back, and I recognize
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we go through these various questions, I see myself constantly going over to Mr. Courtney and Mr. Trent's turf, because we need to work together on these things. I was just asking our team here about your number one on your 26 priority list. which is the removal of the statutory 10-ship limit to buy used ships. And then you argue why you need to do that. That's okay as long as we're building ships along the way. And the 10-year is associated with the time frame and specific kinds of ships that you would want to acquire, ro-ros or tankers or whatever. I would very much appreciate detailed information on why the 10-ship limit in the current law is putting you in a position where you cannot meet the needs of the mobility, sea lift, and then how you would maintain the construction of American ships. And I want you to do this in a way that might be a little different. It's something we've talked about for a good while along here, and that is to make certain vessels in the Jones Act fleet militarily useful and available to the military when needed. Some of this is actually happening at a small vessel level, but it seems to me that if we may have an opportunity, and this actually is in the Ships Act, is that if we could use the Jones Act fleet, encourage it to expand, even subsidize that fleet. For example, an oiler, you put a king post in the middle of it and a couple of whatever else you might need, we might be able to do two things simultaneously. That is to build the ship in America, American crude, and subsidize it to the point of being militarily useful. The same thing with ro-ros. Some of those are useful in the Jones Act fleet. So there's a whole array of vessels, some of which might be useful or might be on your must-have list. And if, in fact, they are there, could they come from the Jones Act fleet, be maintained by the operator in the domestic commerce, and then when you need them, just as the airplanes, which you now can take from the commercial fleet, and hopefully, well, I shouldn't go there about where we're sending immigrants, but let's just leave that aside for a moment. You have an opportunity, or you have a program with the airline industry to call on, whenever needed, various airplanes to transport your military needs. We could do, actually, the law actually exists in the maritime industry. We've not used it for a long time. It seems to me it's one of the things we can do. So I'm putting that on the table. It requires very specific information. What kind of ships do you need? When do you need them? And do they exist in the Jones Act fleet? Could we subsidize? We'll buy a king post and some communication or whatever else might be needed. And if you're going to build a new one, let's build it to a standard that would actually, you could put an Abrams tank on it rather than the current decks, which would probably cause that tank to exit through the bottom of the ship. So anyway, if you could work with us on that, I think we have an opportunity here to do at least two things simultaneously: rebuild our fleet that you need, and simultaneously encourage our shipyards as well as the mariners, and there's ways in which all of these things can work together. However, we need to be very specific. I will tell you, I will not support a removal of the 10-ship limit until such time as you give us the program going forward. What do you need through time? What kind of ships are those? Do any of those exist in the current Jones Act? Could the new future Jones Act fleet achieve that goal? With that, I'll yield back, and we'll go to the next issue when the next round comes. Thank you.
Chairman Kelly, you're recognized for your opening questions.
Thank you again for being here, General Reed. I just want to reiterate the 10-ship, we've given the Navy and our shipbuilders time to do that, and if we continue to expand that cap, what will happen is we still won't build ships. So there's not a lot of support without justification. And there's a difficult justification to buy more ships without building American and building them here. buying used ships is a part-time solution and it's a Band-Aid. We need to look to the long-term solution. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the 186 Air Refueling Wing at Key Field in Meridian, Mississippi, named after the Key brothers, who on June 4th, 1935, in the Ole Miss, which is now in our Smithsonian here, flew for 653 hours and 34 minutes, 27 days via air refueling, and introduced the automatic shutoff valve, which is still in use in our Air Force today. I think history matters when we talk about our air refueling, and no one did it better or longer than the Key brothers. General Reed, during our office call, we discussed the increase in air refueling requirements, primarily for STRATCOM. What are your concerns?
Thank you. The concerns that I have is that we continue to recap that fleet without a break. The KC-130s, the KC-135s that we have are aging. As they continue to age, it's harder to find the parts. Once we actually find the parts and we begin to fix the airplanes, it takes longer. So the faster that we can continue to replace those planes, it's key. We've mentioned the KC-46 already. It does have some challenges. When we are able to get the parts for that aircraft and use it, then it works fine as well. So the pace at which we recap the aircraft, the investment that we continue to have to keep the ones we have flying, that's the concern.
And I want to talk a little bit about that. That's one thing at DOD and here in Congress we have to do. We have to send a consistent demand signal. If we want KC-46s, we got to let them know how many we're going to buy and how many we're going to build, and then they've got to meet their part of the contract. It's the same thing with ships. If we want to buy them on the foreign market, we're not going to build ships here until there is, because all these private companies exist to make money, and they can only do that when they have a consistent demand signal. That's why we have to send a consistent demand signal that we are going to build ships here. The C-17 aircraft is approaching the end of their service life. So what are the plans to recapitalize our cargo fleet in the Air Force?
So both the C-5 and the C-17 are workhorses for us. They continue to perform when we need them to. Those airplanes also require investment to make sure that we can sustain them as well. The issue with the C-17 is while it performs well, a lot of folks think that it's new, and it's not a new plane. And so we will continue to use it and stress it, and because it takes such a long time to build the next plane, the time is now to start looking at the next one.
And probably my final question, are there enough civilian mariners to man the MSC fleet? Are there enough commercial mariners and tankers to meet the TSP and the MSP's operational needs, especially as we work to grow the size of these fleets?
As we look at the plans and how we're to respond to that, for the initial response to a crisis and conflict, yes, we do. The challenge that comes with that pool is once we go into a protracted stage, we plan on a rotation of the force, and we don't have enough crews to maintain that sustainable rotation. But if I may add, if you will, I'd also like to clarify that a lot of folks think when we talk about that workforce that there's a challenge to build ships and to buy ships for that force. It's not necessarily that we'll be challenged to find the people for what we build and what we buy. We need to replace what we have so the force that we do have, they have something that's more reliable.
And finally, I'm not going to ask this in the form of the question. I'm going to make it in the form of a statement. But the new build Sea-Lift program is the best pathway to recapitalize the National Defense Reserve Fleet and support the American shipbuilding industry. We have to build our own ships. We can't rely on foreign people to build our ships. We have partners and allies that can do that, but if we want to be a great maritime nation, we have to build great maritime ship. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. And Mr. Courtney, you're recognized for your opening questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And General Reed, when you and I met a couple weeks ago, we had a discussion regarding the Jones Act, which, again, your predecessors have always, publicly stated support for that. I was wondering, again, if you could address that question and also just what your thinking is part of your answer.
The stipulation of the Jones Act is that we have U.S.-built ships and those ships are crewed by U.S. citizens to carry U.S. cargo. And so from the outset, I see that as a way to maintain the readiness of the force, maintain a pool of folks who can actually crew the ships, and then if the nation needs them, they're there. And with the availability of the cargo, we have a way to actually maintain the readiness as well. So for us, it's absolutely critical.
Thank you for your answer, and you know, obviously I agree with that answer, as I think many of us do. You know, there's always sort of voices in Washington that sort of speak against, you know, whether the Jones Act should be continued, but I think it's important for people to remember the Jones Act was passed after World War I, when our country discovered that we had a shocking lack of capacity for sea lift in terms of getting troops and materials over to Europe. And Congress enacted the Jones Act as a way of making sure that we never sort of fall into that same predicament. It's not a total solution by itself. Obviously, the numbers, as you've testified, don't lie in terms of the fact that we've got to do more in terms of expanding production, as Mr. Kelly said. But again, repealing the Jones Act would actually just make a difficult problem even worse, you know, for our sea lift and our national security. You know, as I mentioned in my opening statement, so in 2023 and 2024, we enacted provisions for the start of a new build program using a vessel construction manager model, which is exactly what is happening right now at the Philly shipyard, where the Maritime training fleet is getting actually towards the end of the block buy of 600 plus long outstanding quality ships that are being built within contract price because of the fact that it uses this vessel construction manager model. That's a very much a private sector approach in terms of getting a basic design and repeating that design without adding lots of requirements that drive up the cost. So again, this is more of a MARAD question, and I don't want to be unfair to you in terms of that, but I just want to at least put on the record that we have a real life success story in terms of just how we can, in the U.S. at a great shipyard right across the river from Mr. Norcross's district, that shows that we can do it affordably and actually in a achievable time frame if we put our minds to it. And that's exactly what we enacted in terms of last year's NDAA. So when we have our friends from MARAD over here, I mean, we really, if we're being asked to keep raising this cap for foreign buys, we've got to start seeing that the other provisions that we pass as laws here, which we lifted the cap, as you testified in your written testimony, that we're actually seeing the whole bill implemented, not just part of it. And with that, I'm going to yield back and look forward to your testimony in the classified session later this afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
If I may provide a response to that. Great partnership between Transcom and the Maritime Administration. And in my conversations with them as the practitioner, it's clear to each of us that we need to use every lever that we can to actually buy down the ages of the fleet. I am aware that they have plans for a ship. I am aware that they have a process with which to build. And from what my understanding is with them is that once they have appropriations in hand, it would take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to actually build the ship and get the ship into the fleet. And so there's a process there that works. The appropriations would be the next step for that. And then as long as we could also do that as well as buy use, we will be well on the way to make sure that we could refresh the fleet.
Thank you for your answer. You're a good partner for MARAD. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Scott, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In general, we don't always agree up here. I'm actually in favor of lifting the cap, hopefully with the full year CR. You can purchase ship 8 and 9. I don't know if you'll be able to do that before the end of the year. Do you think you can do that before the end of the year?
Yes, Representative.
Okay. So assuming that you get 8 and 9 done, how old are the ships that you're replacing with the two used ships that you will be purchasing?
So the oldest ships in the fleet are well over 50 years.
And if you needed to go to war today with that 50-year-old ship, could you?
It is not as reliable as I would like.
So if we don't raise the cap, then you're limited to purchasing one additional ship. And how old are the ships that you're buying for 8 and 9 that you're using to recapitalize the fleet?
Representative, those ships are the ones that we're looking for, the ones that are available to us that fit our needs. They're about anywhere from 10 to 12 years old.
Okay, 10 to 12 years old. All right. And they're replacing ships that are over 50 years old.
That's correct.
So it's safe to say that if we ended up in a conflict where we had to transport men and women and equipment, that we would be better served and more likely to win with a 10-year-old ship than with a 50-year-old ship.
That's correct.
And that is the reason I'm for lifting the cap. I think we need to replace the 50-year-old ships with 10-year-old ships. And my understanding is, and you said 3 to 4 years, my understanding was it was going to take 4 to 5 years if we provided the infusion of cash to get the shipbuilding started again in the United States. But either way, let's just call it 4. That's a long time, and I don't have a problem with going down a path where we recapitalize, for better terminology, the U.S. shipbuilding industry. But let's be honest about what we're talking about buying here. We're not talking about buying aircraft carriers. We're talking about buying generic roll-on, roll-off container ships, correct?
That's correct.
That we see going in and out of every port in America. We're not talking about buying them from China. We can buy them from Singapore. We can buy them from South Korea. We can buy them if they're manufactured in Japan. And the other thing, these are used ships, not new ships.
That's correct.
I just from the standpoint of having the ability to get the job done if we end up in a war, I think we need to continue to buy the 10-year-old ships and get rid of the 50-year-old ships. If we're going to rebuild the shipbuilding industry in the United States, I hope we do that. I would tell you, I personally would prefer that we spend that money on warships instead of generic roll-on, roll-off ships. But that's a discussion for the committee. But we've allowed ourselves, because of this World War I era law, to get into a position where we can't get our men and women and equipment into place if we end up in a conflict in a foreign land. And so I have colleagues that I very much respect here that don't want the cap lifted. I very much think the cap needs to be lifted, and we're putting our ability to win at risk by not lifting it. Same thing somewhat with the C-5 and C-17, except for it's not the Jones Act. These have been two workhorses for a long time. Robins Air Force Base rebuilds those planes. When they come out of there, they're pretty much like new. But when are we going to develop a new strategic airlift and increase the airlift capacity that we have as a country?
I've had that conversation with the United States Air Force. As part of that, I know that as they were looking to recap and replace the next air refueler, they were also looking at maintaining that process to look at the next airlifter. And so as far as the timing that they have for that, I would have to defer to them.
Yeah. I would just submit to my colleagues on the committee that I don't think we need to wait a decade to start developing the next fleet of airlift capacity aircraft for our country. With that, General, I appreciate your time and your service, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, and we'll take a moment here of very special personal privilege and yield to my colleague, Mr. Mills, for a brief introduction of a very important individual who has just joined us here in the hearing room. Mr. Mills, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you guys being here today, but as it is the National Medal of Honor Day, I want to recognize a guy that is truly an amazing man, a man of honor, a man of courage, and someone I consider to be a friend. And even though he says I'm probably the only politician that he likes, that works out well. But I wanted to recognize Master Sergeant Earl Plumley, Medal of Honor recipient who's with us today. A unique individual who also has a Marine and Special Forces background. An amazing individual, has served in combat multiple times in defense of our Constitution and in defense of others, who was in Ghazni during a time that was not a great time when there was a breach and 10 insurgents came through. It was Master Sergeant Plumley, as well as for 2 of his other colleagues, who came to their aid and made sure that we could go ahead and defend that breach. He put himself as a human shield to protect the driver in order to try and get there, and has just exemplified what it is to be a man of courage, a man of honor, a man who didn't do it because he was expecting an award, but because he wanted to truly save and protect those who he fought alongside. And so I just wanted to take a moment and just recognize Master Sergeant Plumley, because you truly deserve it in all facets. And I know you are now trying to get used to the idea of people always applauding you, which isn't always the most comfortable thing. So the fact that I get to make you uncomfortable also makes me very happy. And anytime I get to embarrass you, that also makes me happy. But we truly are in a debt of gratitude for your service and for all that you've done. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me the time to acknowledge him. This is one of those rare moments where we get to see true heroes. And as President Reagan said, for those who said you can't find heroes, you're just not looking. There's one amongst us right now. Thank you, and now I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Again, our thanks to you, sir, for your dedication and your duty and your honor in the force of great, just great danger, and for what you've done for your fellow soldiers and all the folks that you represent across the country, being that example of honor, courage, and commitment. So thank you. With that, we will resume our questioning here, and Ms. Strickland, you are recognized for your questioning for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I represent Joint Base Lewis McChord, which is home to approximately 40,000 total active duty service members, their families, and the 62nd and 446th Airlift Wings who fly C-17s. But I'm going to shift gears a bit and really talk about quality of life for those who are serving. I'm very well aware of the toll that frequent moving can take on our soldiers and families. And I continue to receive constituent messages and conversations about the Global Household Goods Contract, GHC, including stories from service members about the stress, the financial impact, and failed moves that this contract change has brought them. As summer approaches, many thousands of service members and their families will be moving under a program that is not quite proven capable of meeting capacity needs. So, General Reed, we talked a bit about Home Safe and Global Household Goods Contract. Can you talk specifically about the process that Transcom is using to ensure transparency, fiscal responsibility, and accountability in Home Safe Alliance's performance under the contract? Then my second question, sir, has Transcom completed an early performance assessment under Home Safe Alliance's contract? And if so, what did you learn?
Yes, thank you. Under the GHC contract, what we've done so far is we continue to maintain the tender of service, which we currently have, as we make the transition to GHC. Under tender of service, what we do there in collaboration with the services is we work amongst nearly 800 different entities in order to try to meet the needs of a move for service members and their families. Under GHC, we are actually providing structure to the moving market where it actually intersects with the Department of Defense. So it's not that we're actually trying to change the market, we're changing how we have the structure on the portion of the market where we exist. For the GHC portion, we deal with a single entity that has developed an IT system that connects with ours that actually allows us now to see things in a way that we could not see things before. Under the current program that we are transitioning away from, most of that is done by small companies, which is fine, but it's a very manual process. Sometimes it's done with paper. Trying to go back and correct things is incredibly hard. And because there are so many players in the field there, if a problem arises, sometimes it's hard for us to see and correct. With this transition, we've actually put structure in place where now all of that is visible, both to the department, to the movers, and also to the service members themselves. As such, because of this new construct, we actually have levers that we can use to actually address performance shortfalls. Not exactly something that we had before. And so while there are performance issues and while things in spots aren't as solid as we would like them, at least now we can see them. And at least now we can hold a conversation. At least now we can document it. And at least now we have incentives to get the performance that we're seeking. We continue to monitor this all the time, and where we find things that need to be addressed, we actually encounter the vendor and we actually work it real time. The other thing that we do is we continuously update Congress each quarter, and so the push for transparency for us is incredibly strong. And in addition, we invite the press and we chat with them as well. And so we leave no stone unturned because this is not about a program and it's not about the vendor, it's about the service members and the families.
Absolutely, and there are many things that are stressful, and moving is one of them. One thing too, service members, they've reported significant out-of-pocket expenses related to delayed moves and last-minute changes. Can you very quickly talk about what the plan is and the commitment to fully reimburse them?
Under the GHC program, when this happens, we can file a claim, and that claim is for an inconvenience claim. And so then it's up to HomeSafe to actually work that claim. As we continue to look at the performance and as they continue to respond to the shortfalls that we had seen before, we have actually seen within the last few weeks the number of those claims declining, and they've resolved those claims to 100%. And so while there is still work to go, we are actually getting the improvements that we're seeking.
All right, thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. DeJarle, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. General Reed, last fall, the Air Force established the first enduring KC-46 Expeditionary Air Refueling Squadron in the CENTCOM AOR. While the KC-46 has supported CENTCOM operations before, this represents a major milestone. Can you speak to how this deployment went and what it means for U.S. Transcom to now have an enduring presence in CENTCOM?
Thank you. Previously, when we sent that airplane to the theater, it was there for just a short while, maybe for a few days to a week. In this particular case, we sent them for a full deployment. We were very pleased with the performance of both the crews and the plane. Part of that is due to the service having a process to actually allow the units to train for that deployment. But the main factor here that made the difference was a robust investment in spares and parts. And so prior to the deployment, we made sure that we sent over and that we had in place robust crews, robust maintainers, and spares and parts. And then we closely monitored the consumption and the performance of the airplane. The aircraft availability was above 80%. Which is significantly higher than what we find at home station, but the difference was the investment in the spares. So as we continue to go forward, that will be something that you will continue to hear from both the service and from Transcom, support for spares and sustainment.
And during the exercise Bamboo Eagle 25-1, you had 10,000 personnel, 175 aircraft conducting operations. What did you learn? You touched on this a little bit earlier with General Kelly, but what did you learn about the KC-46 performance in this exercise, and expound upon what the Air Force learned about operating in contested environments during conflict?
Once again, for the performance of the airplane, investing in the spares was key. As far as the contested environment goes, being connected to the rest of the joint force was also key. And so with that, all of the training objectives that the crew sought, they were actually able to obtain from that standpoint. The contribution of the rest of the joint force was a exercise in employment of sending forces out en masse, and then responding to simulated attacks, disaggregating, and then coming back together. And the KC-46 was very key in assisting the joint force to learn to operate in that environment.
Okay, and you talked about the spares. C-17 had a program that had an agreed-to level of support to maintain specific level of readiness at all times. So I think what you're saying is that would be helpful if the Air Force implemented these types of agreements to other mobility systems. And would congressional support to fund additional spares for KC-46 help move the needle on aircraft availability on mission-capable rates?
Thank you for that. And for that approach, I defer to the service in terms of how they actually work the programs for that. But the predictability and the stability extends to lots of things. And when we are predictable and stable in the requirements and also the forecasts, and then letting the vendors know what they can expect, then we can fund to that. And so I humbly ask in that respect, on-time budget, please, allows us to forecast, allows us to make sure that things remain predictable and stable.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Vindman, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my colleague did a great job of talking about the global household goods contract. As a 25-year Army veteran and with many moves, including overseas under my belt, that is certainly something that I know is a concern to active duty service members. But I'm going to turn my attention to something else. So under your purview, you have oversight, I guess, or of the strategic highway network. And so what is your assessment now of the strategic highway network, U.S. Rail, that status, and the fact that national security decisions are not factors in the funding for that? How does that affect those systems?
Part of my concern as a TRANSCOM commander is not only contested logistics abroad, but making sure that we can generate the force within the United States to actually get to the ports on the coast and then project from there. Very key to us is, as you mentioned, the highway system, the rail system, and the port system. We have an analysis section, and my Army component takes a very deep look each year in terms of the health of that system. When it comes to highways, we have some that are very critical for our nets to actually get equipment out of the fort to the port. As we look at that system, some of it is federal, but a big portion of it is not. It actually is run and has the oversight of the states, local communities, and the territories as well. While we make our concerns known for defense, they are not always obligated to fund to that, but generally we get cooperation and consideration for that, but that's something that we have to work all the time. That's also the same for rail, and that's also the same for ports.
And as it relates specifically to port capacity, there are only 2 ports that, my understanding, on one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast for transshipment of ammunition. Is that sufficient capacity?
For Matco and Matsu, east and west. They are not the only ports that we have, but they are the most significant ports that we have. And so they are specifically built for capacity, throughput, and to handle the net explosive weight. One of the things that we consistently work on the surrounding communities with is encroachment, to make sure that we can actually protect people when we have to do the operations there.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a couple questions. How much do we spend per year, General, on fuel? All types of fuel.
Representative, for that specific number, I'll have
let's
to get
say
back to
diesel
you.
and jet fuel. How much do we spend a year?
Actually, I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't have that on hand.
You have a guesstimate, a swag?
No, I don't.
Would it be billions of dollars?
It's a lot.
It's a lot? Okay, so I'll put that as a lot. Okay, all right. I wonder how many zeros are behind a lot. How much money do you spend transporting fuel around? Another lot?
It's a noteworthy amount, yes.
Okay, so I got a noteworthy and a lot. Okay, that must add up to something. Okay, do we transport water around?
If required, we have in the past in extremis, but in the case of fuel, we are responsible to manage bulk fuel, and if necessary, we will actually move the fuel. We obviously move fuel in the air for air refueling. Increasingly, we have responsibility to move fuel on the seas, but that's in response to the needs of the theaters.
And so, I mean, like, let's say on an aircraft carrier, the aircraft carrier itself is nuclear powered. You don't have to worry about that, but you do have to worry about the fuel for the aircraft on the aircraft carrier, right?
Yes, we do.
And so you have a fleet of tankers that supports that battle group to make sure that the aircraft are fueled on that aircraft carrier?
We have some, and we also have access to ships on the commercial realm.
So you'll have commercial ships also supply those aircraft carriers?
We can.
Okay. Is that a vulnerability for us?
Both a vulnerability and an opportunity.
Okay, explain opportunity.
The opportunity is that we have a small amount of ships that we control, that we can move that we can move when we need to. They're there for a quick response as well.
Okay. And
with the understanding that we don't have enough, if we need to use other aspects, potentially through allies, partners, or commercial, we can pursue those as well.
okay. When you have a fixed base, do you use commercial companies to refuel the base itself for the let's say you have an air base somewhere in a foreign country. Do you use commercial resources or commercial companies in order to refuel those bases and supply their needs?
We have the means to do that as well, yes.
Or do you actually refuel it yourselves? How does that work?
For a good portion of that, the Defense Logistics Agency works that, so they're on the supply chain side. They're the ones that actually buy the fuel and actually work the sourcing of the fuel. We help to manage the needs of where the theaters require the fuel, and if they need us to move the fuel, we will actually work that. But it's in collaboration between the theater, the supply chain side, and ourselves to make sure that we get the fuel to where it's required.
Are there any bases where we have to supply the fuel? There are no commercial companies that will do that? Any bases like that? Somewhere remote?
If there's a remote location and they require the fuel, we will work with the theater to find the best possible solution to get the fuel to them.
All right, thank you. So it's a lot and it's substantial. Fair enough. I got the answers I need. Thank you. Could you give me some more specifics, though? But maybe send it to my office. I really like to know exactly how much we spend on fuel. Okay, both diesel and jet fuel, if you could.
Okay, yes, I will, certainly.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, and I yield back.
Mr. Kudo, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Reed, I know you touched a bit on the Jones Act, but in a contested environment, how important is it for us to have a fleet of reliable domestic ships to call on and deploy as soon as it is required? You know, in the Indo-Pacific, specifically where I live, we already lag behind China's maritime fleet. We know this. How would it impact our readiness if we did not have these U.S. flagships available to us in times of aggression or in a contested environment?
Thank you. Having U.S. flagships means that those are U.S. ships, U.S. crews that we can depend on and that we can control. We can make sure that they're absolutely ready. If we didn't have them, we would be depending on the speed of a potential contract for someone who was willing to work with us. And then if they were not willing, then obviously there's a shortfall.
Thank you. So clearly the Jones Act helps to contribute to our readiness posture, especially in the Pacific. Thank you. Going off on another particular topic of interest for me, you know, naturally any and all of our ships in the Pacific will be targets during any kind of contingency. How are you thinking about ship repair needs for these vessels, and what work is currently being done to ensure our domestic shipyards, like the one in Hawaii, are prepared to handle this work? I know this is part of a broader discussion about shipbuilding and ship repair capacity nationwide, but I want to be sure that given the importance of bulk fuel posture, something that was just talked about, that this is something that we are tracking.
So this is a problem that we work in conjunction with the United States Navy, MARAD, and ourselves. For commercial ships, they have the option to get repaired wherever they can. For U.S. ships, we normally will bring them here. And so it's one of those where it depends on the situation, the criticality of the need, and how fast we can actually get the ship repaired.
So I know that we're doing extensive work on the shipyard in Hawaii, as you are well aware, but especially given that China is our pacing threat right now, and our concerns in the Indo-Pacific, do you think we have the capacity that we need to be able to ensure that should we need repairs done during any kind of contested environment, that we'll be able to do so with our current infrastructure there, or do we need to continue to add to this?
Representative, I'll have to get back to you on this one, but I will tell you that in general, as we look to build new, we are finding that we do need to invest a little bit more in the capacity to actually do ship repair and the workforce as well. And so this is a national need as well as a need for U.S. Transcom.
Thank you. Well, definitely, it's a long way. I can tell you, having flown back and forth between here and Hawaii, that's a lot of blue between California and Hawaii, and especially if we're talking about speed and efficiency, then building up back at my home is probably a prudent decision. Want to take us on another course, a topic while I've got some time. You know, in our office call, we talked about aeromedical evacuation challenges and the work U.S. Transcom is doing with the global patient movement. As I mentioned then, I continue to be very concerned about our ability to move large numbers of patients in a contingency, especially in the Pacific. We are very remote where we are. And I know there is angst about the lack of aeromedical evacuation capability in Hawaii specifically. Given the significant needs in this area, if you could ask for anything, even given signaled constraints to future defense budgets, what would you ask for in support of aeromedical evacuation capabilities, particularly in the Pacific?
First of all, I would want a way to recruit more people into the field so that we have more folks to actually provide the care. Second of all, we continue to look at improvements in equipment and make sure that we have ways to actually purchase more equipment and then determine where to actually store that. As we look to see how to continue to build a network to actually move those who need to be moved, how do we build out staging locations to actually bring folks back to the States? And then finally, once we get them back here at home to the lower 48, working with U.S. Northcom for a distribution plan to actually get folks to the point of care once we're here, and if necessary, work with commercial aircraft and surface transportation to actually get folks moved.
Thank you. Definitely, I think we recognize that while Hawaii would be the center point for any kind of mass casualty event in the Pacific or the Indo-Pacific going to the continent, we do currently not have the capabilities to be able to exercise those kinds of functions. And so definitely something we need to work on. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. And Mr. Mills, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General Reed, for being here today. I want to talk about efficiencies within Transcom. General Reed, as your current administration continues to try and fulfill its promise to find and address the waste, fraud, and abuse within the federal government, and the American taxpayers, needing and deserving that, we have this robust and functional DOD, what requires DOD to try and finally pass an audit, which we know has failed on 4 different occasions. What are you doing at Transcom to ensure that your command can pass an audit?
Audit is very important to us. First of all, I'd like to outline the fact that we are committed to it, and we are looking at all of the challenges that we face. First and foremost, we have a plethora of systems that deal specifically with transportation, and then we have a separate set of systems that deal with finance. And those legacy systems, most of which we don't own or control, were never designed to talk to each other. There are a number of systems that reside here in the U.S. and then also some systems that reside abroad. As we trace the mission thread in terms of what we need to get after to make sure that the systems work to get the efficiencies, we have to trace all of the transportation and finance systems that support transportation here on the surface in the U.S. and then strategically outside the U.S. via air and by sea lift. And then once it gets abroad, back on the surface again with someone else. So we're talking on the order of hundreds of systems and thousands of stakeholders that have redundancy and that we need to join together. Fortunately, we have great support to get an enterprise resource planning system that is actually commercially off the shelf, not anything that we're going to design to help us with that. It's not just an IT system. There's also a professional, educational, and cultural change that we're pursuing as well, and also to get help in actually changing the behavior of how we work this system, how we work the processes, and how we eventually merge these two to get to the point where we have a single source of information that we can work with and finally be able to track the data to get to a clean audit. We are working incredibly hard to meet the deadline, and we are leaving no stone unturned for that. We still have a ways to go, acknowledge that, but it's mine to fix.
I appreciate that. Look, this has been one of the things that you're familiar with the United States digital system, which also had the very similar problem, which is that it didn't have the interoperability between departments, agencies, and bureaus to be able to feed the necessary information to ensure oversight, to ensure programmatic overview, and look at the overall systems and its efficiencies. It almost kind of sounds like what you're saying is a Doge-like system that has the interoperability and the capabilities to be able to continue to look at things from a programmatic perspective and then collate all of this data analysis and data mine to be able to grab that for efficiencies would be something of potential value, correct?
That's correct.
I really appreciate that. General Reed, can Transcom offer anything to the rest of the department to assist in this effort, do you think?
Actually, the rest of the department is involved in this as well, and we are depending on them to help us with their systems. We will be the lagging indicator in that, if you will, so the healthier they get, the healthier we'll get, but as we work this system, we'll all get there faster together.
Excellent. And in my last minute remaining, General Reed, in your testimony, you note the challenges associated with sea lift capabilities in Indo-Pacific region. This is obviously very important to all of us, but especially my colleague, Ms. Takuda. Given that this is not a single facet issue or simply a funding problem, please elaborate on how Transcom may implement a more robust maritime presence.
First and foremost is through the exercise program. And so as that theater commander exercises his forces and invites the rest of us to join. Being involved in the planning earlier helps. We've already started that, and we are learning a lot of things that we are applying into our request and how we train.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time and for your service, General Reed. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Seeing that all who are here have asked a first round of questions, we are going to adjourn this portion of the hearing, the unclassified, and we're going to reconvene as soon as we can walk up there. And if you need to take a little rest stop for a second, that's fine too, but we'll reconvene in room 2212 for the classified section of this hearing.